Hey everybody, how's it going? Mark here, Cornerstone Training Systems, and right now we're just kind of finish up part two of a two-part series on the shoulder complex and why retracting and depressing the shoulder is causing your shoulder pain. Okay, so back in the lab here, the Cornerstone Training Lab, aka just my room. This is a side profile, let's just say, of the right shoulder, where this is your ball and socket joint, or this is your shoulder joint. So this big black ball here is just your shoulder joint. The black line here is your shoulder blade. Okay, so black ball, and then this back here, this line matches this black line with where my shoulder blade is. This well, actually, I'll go with this first. This is ribs 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and the big topic today is the pec minor, which is this red, the muscle I have in red here that goes from the coracoid process, so the little bump or little bone that you can feel just kind of below the end of the clavicle right there. And it goes from that coracoid process down to ribs 3, 4, and 5. And what you get is gripping at the pec minor from the down and back position is going to cause tons of anterior tilt. So in the last video we talked about upward rotation, right? And that was in the plane where, and I can add another video again on this, where your scapula kind of moves up like this, right? If the person was facing into the page, but in this view it's more the person is facing this way, and this is a side view of the right shoulder, just like I'm standing right here. So this is a side view of my right shoulder, where it's like ball, shoulder, shoulder blade, shoulder blade. Pec minor, and that pec minor runs down to these ribs. Now, when you squeeze your shoulders down and back into this position, what depresses the scapula onto that kind of the top of the humeral head, so that there's not a lot of space in the subacromial process, right? So this is the acromion coracoid process, and what depresses that is this pec minor. And when the pec minor gets tight, you see it kind of fulcrums over here. So if I get pull from this direction, my scapula moves up and over. And if this is tilting forward, aka the anterior tilt, and this is tilting backwards, so posterior tilt, the pec minor, when it depresses, it also will anteriorly tilt the shoulder. And we talked about in the last video that you need posterior tilt and upward rotation in terms, or should I say, for pain-free shoulder function. Okay guys, so I'm just going to demonstrate what happens in that down and back shoulder position, and you can do this with me. Is if you take your shoulders and you put them down and back into that stable position that we've all been talking about, right? Down and back into that position. I want you to go ahead and find the coracoid process. And so if you just go along the clavicle till near the end and you just come a little bit down, it just feels like that little bony hook, kind of like I have depicted here, right at the end here. Just sticking out is that little tiny little bone, and that's where your pec minor comes off of. Now I want you to go just below that and apply some cross friction. So just like the pec minor runs down this way, right, through ribs 5, 4, and 3. And if you just apply some cross friction, you can kind of feel the pec minor. It's just this rope, just like I have here in the red line, that runs down there. And if you put your shoulders down and back into that position and then like apply cross friction, you will feel that muscle becomes a rope. And so yeah, it's a part of having your shoulder down and back. When the pec minor activates, you will get this pulling down and this coming up and over, and you'll get that anterior tilt. So I'm actually going to demonstrate that on my shoulder right now. So I just want you to have a look at where my tank top line is, and that follows my scapula, right? So just like in this image, the black is my shoulder blade. Watch what happens when I activate my pec minor here, and you can watch the angle of my scapula change from about that where it is right now over my shoulder. So it comes up and over just like I was showing you here. So I'm gonna activate my pec minor right now and see how it comes from like this position up and over. And now I'm in this anteriorly tilted position. We need to be able to get posterior tilt in order to bring our arm overhead. And so instead of anterior tilt, we need posterior tilted position. And that's what's going to actually allow the head of the humerus to sit back and down in the socket. But when we train in this down and back position, my pec minor is involved in depressing that scapula. But what happens is it also will anteriorly tilt my scapula, so it'll take it from this plane and move it like here. And so if I'm gripped in this position, and you can feel the pec minor right now gripping, is if you take your shoulder blades and you go down and back and rub across where the pec minor comes from, which is that coracoid process of that little bony hook, down, you will find that that thing becomes a rope. And that is the primary muscle responsible for putting you into this anteriorly tilted position where the scapula comes up and over the head of the humerus, causing this up and forward migration of the humeral head. And then you'll get impingement syndromes, clicking, popping, grinding, pain when you bench, pain when you do pull-ups, all of that sorts of stuff. So guys, there you have it. So the last video is more about retraction, right? Why retraction prevents upward rotation of the scapula, which you need for overhead motion. And this one was more depression, and why like squeezing your shoulders down too, even after you track, gets you into that anterior tilted position where there's just no space for the shoulder to move in the shoulder joint. And what's interesting is we think that down and back with our shoulder blades and our whole shoulder complex equals down and back in the socket with the tiny little head of humerus or the ball and socket, which just isn't the case. So down and back actually produces less space in the joint, where there's more just rubbing and friction, and you get your clicking, grinding, popping. So I'm going to be posting more videos like this on Instagram and Facebook, or Instagram and YouTube actually. And go ahead and go over to YouTube and watch the full thing if you guys really are serious about getting rid of that shoulder pain that you've had for weeks, months, or years. And also go ahead and give it a like and a share. Thanks.